When I'm using QGIS, I often like to play around with things because I find it a really useful way of learning how to do things. So that's what we'll do in this video. We're going to create what I call a barcode map using world cities data. So I have a number of layers in my layers panel, but the one that I've got turned on is just a world map layer, which I added to QGIS in the same way I usually do by going to the bottom of the QGIS window and typing world in lowercase in the coordinate box and hitting enter. I've already done that, so I won't do it again. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. I'll turn off the world map layer and I'll turn on this world cities layer. So what I've done is I've created something that I think is quite interesting. It's just a playful experimental thing, but it's a representation of the location of larger cities across the world by longitude, just by drawing vertical lines through where the city is. And you can also do the same by latitude. So these are horizontal lines through where cities are. As you'd expect, most of them are in the north. But this all comes from a world cities layer, and this is in the description. So really, this is just about playing with data to understand the kinds of things you can do in QGIS, and in particular, using Geometry Generator. So let's take a look. The first thing I will do here is just filter the data set. You can do it in the whole data set, but you might find it slows down your computer. And we don't really need to do it on the full data set anyway. So I'm going to filter this world cities layer by right clicking on it. And then I'm going to choose filter. And from here, I see all the columns in my data set, and there's one called population. So I'll double click it, then I'll hit the more than button, and I'll simply type in 500,000. So what that's going to do is it's going to show only those cities which have more than 500,000 people. And this is it's a data set which has populations of cities, but don't read too much into the individual city populations. It's more about the method here. But it gives us a good approximation of this, and you can see there's so many in China and India. Okay, so that's the layer as it is filtered. And here is how it is with the horizontal lines, and here is it with the vertical lines. And how do we create that? Well, we use Geometry Generator. So I'm going to turn on the vertical lines one, and I'm going to double click that. But before I do, I just want you to know that these are just duplicates of the world cities layer. So if you want to duplicate a layer, you can always right click a layer and go to duplicate layer. So I'll double click on the world cities layer that's got the vertical lines in it. And if I go to symbology, we can see what's going on here. It is in single symbol mode, but when I click here, it doesn't say simple marker like it usually would. I've changed it to Geometry Generator. The next key thing is it was a point, but I've changed it to line string. And then there's some expression here. So to explain this, I'm going to click on the little expression button. And this is one of the amazing things about QGIS. You can use this thing called a Geometry Generator in symbology to make a point, in this case world cities, look like a line. But let's have a little look at this. Now, one thing that's important is when you're writing expressions, having, lots of white space in them or more spaces than you need, that's not going to mess up your expression. I usually separate my lines out just to make it easier to read. But if you hit return a few times and the brackets are down there, it doesn't matter. So don't worry about any of that. It's all fine. So what's going on here? Well, first of all, we've got this expression called make line, and that's going to make a line. And you can search for these things in the search box, make underscore, and then you see all the geometry tools. So this one's called make line. So it's quite useful to get into the habit of looking at these things and reading the description. So the function called make line, it creates a line from a series of point geometries. So we've got make line, but as it says, we need to tell it where the line is going from. So it's going from one point to the other point. So that's why we use make point. And in this case, the first point is this expression. So make point, and what we're doing is we're making a point at the x coordinate of a city. That's why there's a $ and an X. the line is going from the x coordinate of the city to the highest value of any of the city's y coordinates. And that's a bit difficult to understand at first, but that's why there's a dollar sign and a y, and that's why it says maximum. So if you think a city like San Francisco, the line for San Francisco is going from its x coordinate vertically towards the highest y value that any city has. And it's the same for the other point. It's going from the x coordinate to the minimum value. And what that means is we get a vertical line for each city. Now, let me show you actually doing this on the layer I've got here. I'll double click on it and I'll tell you what I'll do here. Instead of changing the simple marker, I'm going to add another symbol. And in this one, I'm going to change it to geometry generator. So you can do this in QGIS. You can add multiple marker symbols or symbologies to individual layers. And I'll do that in the geometry type. I'll change it to line string. And I'm going to paste that in there. So I've just pasted in the expression that I used. And if I hit apply, and let me just change the line thickness and make it a little bit transparent so we can see through it. Okay, so that's what we have. We have the highest vertical line is only going as high as the highest cities, and same with the most southerly ones. So these vertical lines that we're telling QGIS to draw with geometry generator are only going as high. I want to change this to red. They're only going as high as the most northerly city, and they're only going as low as the most southerly city. And we can see how this would change if I change the filter to include all cities above 250,000 people. It will, I'll test this, it extends a bit further south and a bit further north because it's always drawing a line to the most northerly city of all the cities to the same latitude that it's at. Okay, so that's what's going on here. I'll double click it again. I've added another symbol, geometry generator. It was a line, and that's what's going on. And if I change that layer to turn it off and turn this one on, it's exactly the same kind of thing here. I've used a geometry generator, but this time the line for each city is going from the maximum x value, which is longitude. So it's going to be as far east as the furthest east city, and it's going to be as far west as the furthest west city. And in this case, we're just using the y coordinate of each city. So I'll put these expressions in the description for the video. It certainly can take a little while to figure out what this means, but the key thing here is we're using a point symbol, but we're changing the symbol layer type from simple marker to geometry generator. We're changing the geometry type to line string away from point. And then we're using an expression to make a line, and we're making a line between 2 points, and we're defining the points this way. Okay, so the best way to do this is just to experiment yourself. Now, if I click on OK for that, I could go back to this one here. And if you wanted to, for example, let's say you want to add in some symbology as well, you can actually go back, and I could change this symbol here to graduated, and I could graduate it by population, and I could change the color scheme. Let's use a crazy one like turbo and click classify, and then OK. So now it's classifying cities by population. That color scheme doesn't really work, it's too crazy, so let me change that again. If I change it to a more sensible color scheme, maybe that's a little bit more sensible. The most populous cities get the orange color, the yellow color. But because we have the geometry generator on, it's still doing that. And if you want to see where the geometry generator has gone now, when you change it to graduated, if I go to symbol and hit the drop down here, you will see configure symbol, and then you'll still see the geometry generator in there. Often people don't quite know where to find that, but if you have a geometry generator on and you change the symbology to something like graduated, click on the symbol drop down. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to experiment with this, have a little bit of fun, just play around. I just did this for a little bit of an experiment to see the kinds of things you can do with geometry generator in QGIS. Hopefully you can apply it to your own things, maybe for your own country or whatever, and just have some fun playing around and learning in this way.